thought it would be a good idea to show you guys all the work that's involved in designing a dress. So it just so happens that I know a designer right here in Cold Lake. So this is Cassandra Newton of EME Couture, and she won the Emerging Designer in 2015 for Western Canada. Tell us about yourself.
So I started EME Couture just after winning the competition in 2015. That kind of kick-started my brand, and now I'm designing custom couture gowns for the average woman, the average girl in Alberta and across Canada.
So today we're going to be talking about your creative process, how you get started sketching and all that kind of stuff. So here we go. Okay, so first question is, would this be considered haute couture or a designer dress, and what is the difference?
So I legally cannot call my stuff haute couture. Reason being is anyone who calls their stuff haute couture, like Alexander McQueen and Versace, who have ateliers over in Europe, they have gone to the board in Paris that controls fashion, basically. They're the end-all to be-all of fashion, and have to present their items and their process and everything to be able to legally call their stuff haute couture in the public. So I call it more couture. Designer is another way to speak of it, but basically anything can be called designer. When you're going from a more fashion perspective, if you just say the word designer, a lot of people will immediately think of things like Gucci and Louis Vuitton and those higher end. And one day I hope to be kind of at that level, but I like to say I make more couture for the everyday woman.
Okay.
So more accessible.
Can you tell us about your process, like how you get started, how you get your ideas?
Most of my ideas I get from nature and music. I'm always listening to music when I'm thinking of things. I get a lot of ideas when I'm driving, because I do a lot of driving because we live in a little town and I have to go out of town all the time. And I listen to a lot of instrumental music when I'm driving, and I'll get little ideas of things I see off the highway. And so for this collection, I pulled a lot of inspiration from nature itself. I'm calling it Spirit. So it's based off of the 5 elements. A lot of people only think of 4. So earth, fire, water, air. But then there's spirit in the center of it.
Okay.
And I am using a lot of that to kind of, in a less literal way, translate that into fashion and bring it into a more couture, almost bridal collection, which I've never done before.
Okay.
I've never done a lot of bridal just because of the accessibility and resale value of it. But now that my items are in a bridal store, I have more ability to resell. So I'm kind of leaning more towards that direction, but the Spirit collection is going to be very ethereal, a lot of very flowy fabrics, and I'm hoping it'll read really well on the runway mixed with my music, so people will get the inspiration behind it.
Okay. So what makes something bridal exactly?
Not necessarily color. A lot of people would think, oh, well, bridal is just a white dress. If you do a collection of white dresses, you're bridal. Not necessarily. You can take a lot of the classic bridal designs and put them in a different color, and they're still considered bridal. Bridal is a very personal thing to a bride, so it's whatever each individual bride interprets it as. So I have a few gowns I'm going to be doing in white and ivory, but then I have some that I'm doing in pinks and champagnes and blues that read as bridal, but could be used for other things as well,
okay,
depending on the bride or the person purchasing it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, so tell us about your sketching.
And I always start with the final finale piece for any collection, and then I build off of that. This one's been rolling around in my brain for a little while. So this one will be inspired by the element water. So I want a lot of very flowy fabrics that come right from the top to the bottom with a lot of structure built in. So there'll be a corset underneath. All of this will be open. So I just do my base sketch, and then I drape fabric on the mannequin, see what kind of fabrics I'm going to use. Sometimes when I'm sketching, I know exactly what fabric I'm going to use. Sometimes I'll see a fabric and go, oh, I'm going to make this kind of dress. But with this one, it's just this style has been rolling around in my brain for a while, so I'm going to pick what kind of fabrics I'm going to use that are going to give me that draped effect that I want in the front. That will drape around to the back, and then there will be sleeves that come off it as well, off the shoulder. And the idea that everything will flow from top to bottom and be one fluid piece on the runway.
So was there a particular song that inspired this, or?
Not necessarily. I have been listening to this one, it's not really a band, it's kind of an orchestration, that has inspired a lot of this collection as I've been listening to a lot of their music. And it's all very powerful, almost ethereal.
Okay.
Almost like the music they play at the end of some epic fantasy movie like Lord of the Rings or things like that.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. So just thinking, using that music and nature together has really inspired a lot of this.
Alright, so tell us about the materials.
So with this design specifically, I didn't know what exactly I wanted to use for fabrics yet, but looking at it now, I definitely need something a little bit more flowy. So this would be something I would use more for the earth gowns, that nice champagne sparkle a little bit, probably a more fitted gown because you'll lose a lot of that effect in anything that's draped and gathered.
Okay.
So you want something a little bit more plain that you can drape into those lines, and you're going to see every detail of each fold in the fabric and the little sparkle I'm going to add going down. So I also thought of this fabric, but of course it's a print, so that will be for something else. This is the back side of the fabric. The front is quite loud, so I was thinking of using the back side of it to soften it, but that will be for something else. I think I'm going to go with something like this. So it's either between an organza, which is a little bit stiffer, but can hold a shape really well, and it's see-through, but this is just for the outer base of the fabric. Or I have a crepe chiffon, which drapes really well, can be quite heavy, but it flows very nice. So it catches the air very well. So if I put these on my mannequin, then I can play around with the draping and see how it would fall and what kind of effect I want to get from it. And then a base underneath would usually be out of a satin.
Okay.
That's where I get all of the rigidity for any kind of corsetry that's underneath, that's going to hold the person in and make sure that everything on the outside stays where it should. So when we're doing draping, it will ensure that anything that's tacked to it doesn't move.
Okay.
So if you want the fabric to drape in a certain way, I can make sure it's attached to the underlying structure so that it sits where it's supposed to, and you're not having to play with your dress all day.
Okay.
So the idea I want to do is off the shoulder and have it come and drape around over the bust, come into the center, and then down and flow. And I'm thinking the chiffon is going to be what we're going to use. The organza is quite heavy to use, or quite thick to use over the bust. It adds a lot of excess bulk.
Okay.
And it's a lot harder to contain for a top. Whereas we can get away with a lot more of the chiffon and get a lot more folds without creating a lot of bulk, because it is a lighter, thinner fabric. And it will catch all of the wind going down the runway, so it can flow behind really, really nice.
Nice.
So it'll come down into the center, so there'll be a line here as well, and then it will flow out behind. All laid over a satin like this. So this is a light blue bridal satin in a matte, so it's not very shiny. I like using more of the matte satins because I find the shine adds almost a cheapness to it. The matte looks a lot more rich, and it's quite sturdy, so I add a little bit of interfacing, and it makes a really good structure to lay fabrics like this on top of. So I think that's what I'm going to go with.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you very much for giving us your time and showing us these things.
Not a problem.